Good afternoon, New Orleans, or wherever you may be. It's Wednesday at 4 o'clock, so this must be the Baldy and the Blonde show. But once again, the Blonde is not here in studio. She was absent last week, and I ran solo. But this week, I hope she's on the... Michelle, tell me you're on the phone. Thank you. I hear a laugh.
Yes, here I am.
It's much more fun having you with me.
Yeah, we have more fun together, for sure. For sure. But, you know, everybody's got to take a vacation sometime. So I am, however, on my way back. So
all right.
I do appreciate.
But you're going to be on for just the first segment today, right?
Just the first segment, because I'm on the road. But I pulled over and I'm able to speak for the first segment. And I want to thank you, Baldy, for doing a great job by yourself because, hey, I left you hanging. So
you did leave me hanging. I had about an hour notice last week that I was going to be on my own. Thank you very much. But
I thought it was less than that. It was less than that. It was an hour. I feel better then.
I handled it.
It was an hour.
So anyway.
You did good, yeah.
So we are together. We're Baldy and the Blonde. Well, when we are together, we're Baldy and the Blonde. I'm Tom Coates, and on the phone is Michelle Godin.
So I'll be back next week. But for this week, since it's Holy Week, I thought, you know, I'm just so interested, and I am by no means an expert, but just regular, you know, common person interested in the Shroud of Turin. And I thought it would be a good week to just talk about it a little bit because it's Holy Week culminating, well, we have Holy Thursday on tomorrow, Good Friday, and then Easter Sunday. And so I thought the Shroud of Turin would be a cool thing to talk about. So the Shroud of Turin is, you know, there's a lot of scientific proof now that it is, in fact, the burial cloth of what many people believe to be Jesus. And that, you know, it's been around and a long story, and we certainly don't have time to talk about the entire historical background to the thing. But over the centuries, it's always been venerated as a burial cloth of Jesus. And it looks like it's folded lengthwise. There are wounds consistent with the crucifixion of a person who also had a thorn crown on his head with the many, many strikes across his entire body. And in the Bible, I forgot to pull up the quote. Tom, do you know the quote where, you know, John and Peter go into the tomb, and what do they see? They see a cloth, and separate from that, I think they see a separate cloth that was wrapped around Jesus' head.
That's exactly right. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. I meant to read it, but I forgot to pull it up. So, you know, Mary Magdalene goes to the tomb on Easter Sunday. Oh, wow, Jesus isn't there. She runs back. He tells John and Peter, and what I kind of, as an aside, think is funny, in John's Gospel, he twice says, and they ran back to the tomb, but John outran Peter because he was faster.
Well,
he does say that twice.
It was younger, I think.
Well, he was younger, but it's just funny. It's funny that he pointed that out.
Well, you know what's interesting is that sort of detail is what makes it more realistic. Why would you write that if you were writing a fake story?
You know what? It's really true. I always laugh at it because I believe that it's real, you know, but it is true. It's an authentic detail that you just wouldn't think to make up if it was fake. So, and you know, when people say, oh, there's no evidence of Jesus, there's way more evidence of Jesus than most things that we take for granted as being true. Including from non-biblical sources like Josephus, etc. But anyway, I digress. So, over the years, this shroud has been, you know, bandied about, found in different places, and then there's pictures of it from the Middle Ages, all the way, you know, paintings of it. So, but finally, in 1898, this is where things really get interesting, because I feel like a lot of times we go like, we don't see Jesus raising people from the dead. We don't see any of these major miracles, but the shroud could be the miracle of our time. And in 1898, an Italian photographer named, I believe, Segundo Pia, took a picture, because photography wasn't invented before that, and he takes a picture of the shroud, and it turns out that when he develops it, he realizes the shroud is actually a negative, so that the photograph now reveals a much clearer picture because it is a positive and actual photograph as though you had developed a negative. I mean, that's crazy. So that right there is, first off, it's just really inexplicable.
Yeah, hard to
and
explain that,
so
isn't
interesting.
it? Yep.
Yeah, inexplicable. So, but there's more evidence for, a later generation to discover the secrets of the burial of Jesus and of Jesus' resurrection. So is this proof? Okay. Also, in addition to the image, which there's no one who's ever been able to come up with an explanation as to the image on the cloth. Nobody.
Right. It's not pigment or ink or paint or anything like that.
Nothing like that. And the image itself is on top of the blood from the dead man. And then there's pollen from Jerusalem around the time of Jesus' death. The blood type is AB, which other artifacts from Jesus always test for AB blood. But then there was this carbon dating thing that happened in the 80s, or not, I forget it, maybe it was the 90s. And it's from 1280, 1390, so it can't be. It can't be the burial cloth of Jesus. It's too late. It's the Middle Ages. But then this is one of these wild stories with this lady named Sue Benfield. I think she was a nurse or something, but she also was interested in fabrics and stitching, and she noticed that the stitching of the places where they took the samples was different than the rest of the cloth. And in fact, the shroud had been in a fire, and unfortunately, the samples were taken from those parts that had been repaired. Right. So, turns out that the carbon dating has been debunked by many scientists, and some still hold true to it. But to me, this, hey, look, if you want to really know a lot about this, go to shroud.com, which is, just a collection of everything by a Jewish guy who was involved in the original examination of the shroud with a bunch of NASA scientists. And Tom I didn't even know he died. He died in October. And he was, a profound believer in the authenticity of the shroud. So anyway, there's also been some new studies through a science called waxes, which puts it in the 54 to 72, I think, AD time period. But to me, one of the most interesting things is there's a 3D image embedded in this ancient 2,000-something-year-old piece of cloth. So it's a thing that could never have been discovered until recently, starting with the Italian photographer, and then in the 1970s, these guys from NASA, including Barry Schwartz, they took these pictures with, I don't know, some kind of special NASA camera, and they were able to see the 3D information embedded in the shading of the grayscale. I don't know what that means. I just wrote it down so I said it correctly. But it has to do with the distance between the cloth and the body under the cloth at the time of the image formation. So it implies a mechanism that the body's image was projected onto the cloth without the body touching it. I mean,
wow.
Sounds like a resurrection,
now,
right? Sounds like, yeah.
Now we're down to 1:40. And now, okay, so I don't have anything to add to that. That was a great summation. But I will say this, that it's not an important thing that Christians look for absolute proof, because it's not proof and knowledge that's important, it's faith. So
correct.
So because this does it totally appears to be burial cloth of somebody because of the way you described it, but it just so happens to match, because I did do a little bit of research for this. It just happens to match the biblical description of the torture of Jesus and the wounds he sustained. So
that's right.
It really does look like a miraculous, like evidence of a miracle. But we shouldn't be looking for proof.
Go to shroud.com. Have a happy Holy Week and a happy Easter. See y'all next week.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. Well, that everyone was the great Michelle, the great and absent Michelle Godin. She will be back next week. I am Tom Kowitz. Together, we are the team of Baldy and the Blonde. We're here every Wednesday at 4. You can listen to our previous shows. There's a link to all of our previous shows at baldyandtheblonde.com. And on X, we are at Baldy Blonde. We will be back in a few minutes after this break. Welcome back to the Baldy the Blonde Show. I'm one of your hosts, Tom Kowitz. If you missed that first segment, you can listen to it after I post the show on baldyandtheblonde.com. It was interesting. It was Michelle giving a good summary of the Shroud of Turin and its history, and we concluded it's a miracle. And it's a good time for that because this is Holy Week. So now we're going to totally switch gears. I wanted to just talk a little bit about the budget resolution. And I'll tell you what, I'm definitely no expert on this sort of thing, but I do know more than the average Joe. And in looking at this stuff, it's really confusing. And I wish I could have had someone with more expertise on the topic join us, but I wasn't able to get anyone. So I'm going to do the best I can with it. But a budget resolution is not a budget. Remember, it used to be presidents would submit budgets and they'd hammer one out eventually. This is a different animal. A budget resolution is basically like a blueprint, a congressional blueprint for federal spending and revenues and borrowing. It's like a roadmap, but it's not binding. But it's like a roadmap for their priorities and their fiscal policies, that sort of thing. And it's usually I think this is over 10 years. Part of the process is what they call resolution instructions or Senate instructions. And those are basically directives to the committees, the different Senate committees, instructing them to draft legislation that'll meet the budgetary goals, maybe increasing or decreasing spending for a particular program or raising or cutting taxes, that sort of thing. But again, none of this is binding. It's just part of the resolution are instructions. And so we'll get into that in a little bit, some of those, what we know about those instructions. But first I want to play, Kobe, I'm going to need you to play this one. This is clip 20. What you're going to hear is Mike Johnson, I don't know, it was yesterday or a couple of days ago, talking about this resolution and what we can expect. Go ahead.
This process has required a lot of close consultation between the White House and the Senate. And all of that has been necessary because we want to make sure that we are delivering on our shared goals in the budget reconciliation process. Our big, beautiful bill has to reflect all of that. And so it is big, and it involves a lot of areas of policy, and so it requires a lot of close coordination. Our two chambers are directly aligned also on a very important principle, and that is the principle of fiscal responsibility.
Okay, pause that right there. That is a joke. Now, they are working closely together. That part's true. It's also unfortunate. It's better if they could not even reach an agreement, because what happens is whenever they reach an agreement, we're screwed. And he says what their main goal is fiscal responsibility. That's not true, and you'll hear more about that in the next few minutes. Just in case the $36.5 trillion debt right now isn't enough evidence of that. So go ahead.
The party that delivers and ensures that.
Oh yeah, the Republican. Pause that. The Republican Party ensures and delivers fiscal responsibility. That doesn't even rise to the level of a joke. We've had many years where the including now, where the Republicans are in power, and they never do anything except dig us deeper and deeper in debt. Okay, go ahead.
Responsibility. We are the party that delivers and ensures that.
Sure you are.
We also need to achieve the maximum amount of savings for the American people, because that's what fiscal responsibility is. And we even want to start reducing the deficit. We are committed to finding at least $1.5 trillion in...
Oh, I think it cut off there. Okay. So committed to finding at least $1.5 trillion in savings for the American people is how that finished. And then he put a period on that sentence. What he didn't say is over the next 10 years. So he's boasting about 1.5 trillion, but that's 150 billion, and that's not chump change. But it's also not 1.5 trillion, and he's trying to imply that they're saving us all that amount, because a lot can happen in 10 years where that projected savings goes away. Because if it was 1.5 trillion or any amount over the next year, well, there's a lot less chance that whatever figure he named would go away. But 1.5 trillion over 10 years, there's a lot can happen between now and then. And this was all just fiction, just like all the other previous promises. And just to put that 150 billion per year into perspective, here's a headline from a few days ago on Fortune magazine's website. The headline says, Elon Musk drastically drops Doge's savings goal from 2 trillion to 150 billion for the year. And then a line from the article says, in a cabinet meeting on Thursday, Musk told Trump the group expected to slash 150 billion from the federal budget over the fiscal year, which runs from the beginning of October of 2025 to the end of September of 2026. So what all Doge is doing is waste, fraud, and abuse. They don't have authority to be cutting budgets and that sort of thing, but they can see wasteful spending and fraud, and they've called it out and have helped put a stop to it. So my point is, you've got Mike Johnson boasting about 150 billion per year over 10 years, when all it takes to get there is what Elon Musk's group is currently doing with just waste, fraud, and abuse, without cutting a lot of these so-called legitimate programs, i.e. $1 trillion a year military. So I don't know why Mike Johnson is boasting so much about saving 150 billion per year projected over 10 years, when first of all, a lot can happen in 10 years and it likely won't even happen. And second of all, Doge is doing that with in their sleep. So we're not going to have time. We're down to our last minute and a half for this segment. But I do want to come back with an interesting article I found. It was actually just published. Looks like it was a couple of days ago. I thought it was today. It's by a group called the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. They describe themselves this way. It says, we are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization committed to educating the public on issues with significant fiscal policy impact. And just to get an idea, I'm not going to name names on who they are, but this will give you an idea of their credentials. Our bipartisan leadership comprises some of the nation's leading budget experts, including many of the past heads of the House and Senate budget committees, the Congressional Budget Office, and the Office of Management and Budget, and the Government Accountability Office, which that name is a joke. Government Accountability Office. Government has no accountability. You might as well have an office of stopping glaciers or overturning the law of gravity, but I do digress. Anyway, on the other side, we're going to come back and compare what this committee found in this budget resolution compared to these great promises that are coming out of Washington. Welcome back to the Baldy and the Blonde Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Tom Kowitz. The other host, Michelle Godin. She's AWOL today, but she will be back next week. So when we left off, we were talking about, well, I keep saying we, but Michelle's not here. I was talking about the current budget resolution and what a joke it is, and Mike Johnson boasting that it will save the American taxpayers $1.5 trillion, but that he doesn't explain that that's over 10 years and it's only projected, and he doesn't remind everyone that that's only an average of $150 billion a year, which is the amount that Doge is finding just through finding waste, fraud, and abuse. So it really doesn't amount to anything, especially when definitely over the course of 10 years, you can expect there to be some kind of an emergency or some kind of an excuse where, boy, we would have saved you that money, Americans, but we just had this emergency, so it didn't pan out. Now, here's an article that was published a couple of days ago. Actually, I lied. It is today. The headline is, Deficits Could Reach $3.5 trillion with Senate instructions. And as I explained before the break, Senate instructions are basically a guideline for these committees on how they should, whether they should raise taxes or increase or decrease spending for certain programs. Again, it's just a blueprint. It's just guidelines. But these guidelines that are currently in this budget resolution are catastrophic. I'm going to quote just a couple lines from this article. It says the budget resolution includes instructions allowing the Senate to write legislation adding up to 5.8 trillion to primary deficits through 2034. We are estimating that enacting legislation consistent with that figure would result in deficits reaching $3.5 trillion by 2034. The Senate instructions would allow for more borrowing than any recent legislation and make it much more difficult for policymakers to fix the country's fiscal situation. Under these instructions, annual deficits could surpass $3 trillion by 2031 and rise to $3.5 trillion in 2034 compared to $2.6 trillion in 2034 under current law. You heard those last three words? Under current law. So under the current law, we are better off than we are under this budget resolution. They are adding to the debt and the deficit. And then Mike Johnson has the gall to boast about how they're saving the American taxpayers $1.5 trillion, again, forgetting to tell us that it's over 10 years and that it won't happen. So it's nothing worthy of, nothing worth shouting about, being happy about. You wonder why Thomas Massie voted against it. He's one of the good guys. And actually, one other Republican voted against it, a woman from Indiana, but I don't know who she is. Then I'm definitely no expert on tariffs, but I do have an opinion. And it's really just this, that I think they're terrible. I think that the threat of tariffs is one thing, and the implementation of tariffs is something altogether different, because you'll hear people get excited about some concessions we might be getting over the threat of tariffs. Right. That's the threat of tariffs. That's not the implementation of tariffs. They're two totally different things. And I'm all for free markets. And tariffs are the opposite of free markets. And I get it. Yes, we're being tariffed to death and taken advantage of. But there's other ways to influence other countries and their economic policies other than implementing tariffs. If it was that easy, then we would have just done it years ago. It's not that easy. But for example, just how about we just start with taking away all foreign aid? Why don't we just stop with that? And don't even warn them, like, if you don't drop your tariffs, we're dropping foreign aid. Just drop the foreign aid. Now, I could be wrong. There's a lot smarter people than I who advocate for tariffs. I'm just saying that as a libertarian, I cannot advocate for anything that's not a free market. Let the market decide. Of course, on the other side, the argument is that the other countries have tariffs on us, so they're the ones who are warping the market. I get that, but I think these are a bad idea. Then here's an article that just came up on CNN just a little bit ago. It's Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, saying the Fed likely cannot be lowering rates. And guess what? He's right. The rates were artificially low for too long, and it led to catastrophe. If anything, honestly, rates are too low, but we don't really know because we have a central source, a central power, a central bank who makes that determination, and not the free market. That's the importance of having a free market, is the rates will find equilibrium between those who have assets to lend and those entrepreneurs who need to borrow. But when you have a central source who warps the market by just declaring what that rate is going to be, you end up with artificially low rates. Then they try to make a correction, but they were near zero for so long. They had to increase, and they really don't. Whether they increase or decrease, we're screwed at this point. Or whether they stay the same, we're screwed at this point. Because we're screwed at this point because we have $36.5 trillion debt and a House and Senate who've reached this budget resolution that is far worse than what we already have. So, yippee. We're in a bad way no matter what they do, because they're in it for, well, I don't know who they're in it for, but it ain't us. Kobe, do me a favor. Could you play... I want to play a clip by my favorite speaker. It's clip number 21. This is actually me, yours truly, speaking in, I think, 2008 at a tea party in Covington. I think the Times-Picayune said there was, I'm serious, they said something like 50 people were there, and there was about 1,100, but they were trying to downplay the effect of the Tea Party. Anyway, that is clip 21.
We've had many years where the Republicans had control. We had many years where the Democrats had control. We had many years where there was a mix. But it doesn't seem to matter who's there. The results are the same. Bigger government, less freedom, more borrowing, more spending, more inflation, deeper and deeper debt. Do you know what the march of tyranny sounds like? Left, right, left, right, left, right. It's not a question of left or right. It's left and right, ignoring the people and pursuing their own selfish agendas at our very dear expense. Both parties say they want fiscal responsibility, and look at us, we're financially ruined. Both parties say we want a simple tax system, and look at it. We have a tax system that nobody can comprehend. Both parties say they want peace, and yet we're always at war.
Oh, that one got cut off too. I don't know what's up with these. Maybe I'm not good. I'm probably doing something wrong. My apologies. But the point is, it is true. It doesn't matter who's in Washington, left or left and right. They screw us. And at the time that I gave that talk, and again, I think that was July of 2008, the debt was 19 trillion. Now it's approaching double that. I also remember that at that time, besides, separate and apart from the 19 trillion, was the Federal Reserve, I think it was the St. Louis Fed, said that the unfunded liabilities going forward for the federal government are $99 trillion. $99 trillion. That was in 2008. That's basically promises that they've made financially that there's no money for it, and there's no plans to fund it. They don't have a way to fund it. They're just whistling past the graveyard every day, hoping that something happens. And like I said, there's Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, saying, hey, it's all good news because this budget resolution will save Americans $1.5 trillion. It's all a big fat lie. And it doesn't matter if it's the left in there. It doesn't matter if it's the right in there. Like I said in that talk in 2008, we've had years when it was Democrats entirely in control. We've had years when it's Republicans entirely in control. We've had years when it was a mix, but it truly doesn't matter who's there. The debt keeps growing. It's a one-way street, and it's now at 36.5 trillion. And in 2008, when it was 19, that seemed like an impossible number. Now it's impossibler, and just keeps growing and growing and growing. And it's impossible to sound positive about this because, in my opinion, this is the greatest threat to our culture and our national security is this debt. There's no way this ends well. Think back, has there ever been a time that a country had so much debt and deficits as far as the eye can see, and then they stayed on that trajectory, but everything was cool in the end? It's never happened because it's impossible. Anyway, sorry to be such a bummer, but I don't have Michelle here to laugh with. Anyway, I'm Tom Coates. When I'm here with Michelle Godin, and we are Baldy and the Blonde. We'll be back after this break. Welcome back to the Baldy and the Blonde Show. I'm Tom Coates. My much better half, Michelle Godin, is out until next week. So now she was here for the first segment by phone, and you can listen to that there's a link to all of our shows at baldyandtheblonde.com. I'll try to get that posted tonight or tomorrow morning. You can hear Michelle talk about a nice summary of the Shroud of Turin. And then the last couple of segments, I've been really sorry. It's been a real bummer because it's just nothing but financial bad news. And it can't be helped being grumpy because I got a child and grandchildren. And I've had a good life, and they're not set up for good lives. So it is upsetting. So now we're going to totally switch gears to a crazy topic. Well, sounds crazy, and it is crazy, but I think there's something behind it. So there's a program called geoengineering, sometimes called geostratospheric engineering, That's what the people who are doing it call it. They don't deny doing it. They're proud about doing it, but a lot of us believe it's harmful. And there's a nickname for it called chemtrails. Now, as soon as you say chemtrails, everybody wants to call you a tinfoil hat. But all it is basically is the same name for what the people who are doing it, they're just calling it by a different name. Doesn't mean they're not doing it. So we got a few sound clips I want to play. We're going to start with, let's see. Kobe, help me out with this. Let's go. This is kind of a long one. This is number, oh, no, you know what? Let's start with 16. Let's start with 16. This is from a documentary on PBS from 2023. And just real quick, the backstory, my personal backstory on chemtrails is, and I'm a conspiracy theorist at heart. I love all of them. But when I first heard about this one, I think it was in the late 90s, that was too much for me. I thought that was totally crazy. But I had an open mind, enough of an open mind that I would occasionally look in the skies for something like that, for lingering chemtrails, as they're called. And I didn't see any planes doing that. But then after a few years, by the early 2000s, I started seeing it occasionally. And now it's all over the place. Like they're striping the sky. It's like they're playing tic-tac-toe in the sky and sometimes totally covering the sky when this stuff spreads out. And I was watching for it for years and barely seeing it. Now it's just out of control. So the evidence of it, really just look up and don't deny what you're seeing. Anyway, so let's listen to the clip. This is about a minute and a half from a PBS documentary in 2023 talking about geoengineering.
The devastating famine in Africa in the 1980s that killed up to 1 million people. Back then, it seemed the drought that helped cause this catastrophic event was simply due to climate variability. But now, more and more research suggests that it was caused, at least in part, by something the U.S. and Europe did to...
Okay, yeah, pause that. Now, when she says that, as it turns out, she's not talking about spraying or anything like that. It was really just fog coming in from Western Europe and the U.S., smog, and enough that it literally changed the climate over there. Go ahead.
Cool the North Atlantic Ocean. And maybe, even more importantly, we're considering doing something very similar again, but this time on purpose, in a last-ditch effort to help stop the worst effects of climate change. We're talking about solar geoengineering, which involves releasing aerosols into the atmosphere to reflect sunlight. A growing number of voices have been calling for geoengineering by intentionally injecting aerosols into the atmosphere. These aerosols cool the Earth in two ways. First, the particles act like a bunch of tiny mirrors bouncing some of the sun's light back into space. And second, they give water vapor something to stick to, making clouds whiter, fluffier, and brighter, which also results in more sunlight being reflected back out into space.
So that's
what we do know is that releasing certain kinds of particulate matter into the atmosphere can reduce global temperatures extremely quickly, and that hundreds of scientists have come together to urge against using this technology.
So yeah, no kidding, urging against using it. What could possibly go wrong when you create a Frankenstein's monster by intentionally spraying particulates into the air? And of course, now here they are openly talking about it, and the people who are doing it openly talk about it. But then when you call it chemtrails, and it's unfortunate, just don't even use that term. Just use their term, geoengineering, geostratospheric engineering, or they use a slightly different term in that documentary. But it's all the same thing. It's spraying chemicals and particulates into the air, allegedly to attempt to reduce the effects of global warming. Then the next one is from an HBO documentary in 2019. This is clip 17, Cubby. Oh, can you get it?
Studying volcanoes and their abilities to actually darken our skies and thereby cool the planet. At one of the most active volcanoes on Earth, Guatemala's Volcan de Fuego, scientists are studying how ash cloud particles can affect global temperatures. So we visited with volcanologist Matt Watson during the months before its devastating eruption this summer, which killed more than 160 people.
In 1991, Mount Pinatubo erupted. It was the largest eruption of the 20th century, and it had a profound impact on climate. We saw a drop in temperature around about 0.5 degree. We see a drop in global temperature after large eruptions, and that's because sulfur dioxide is injected by volcanoes into the atmosphere. That converts into sulfate aerosol, which act as tiny little mirrors and scatter incoming solar radiation back out into space. That has the effect of cooling the planet. I'm really interested in volcanoes as analogues for deliberate intervention into the climate system. It's climate control, right? It's changing the way the global climate system works to try and reduce the worst impacts of climate change.
Scientists are now studying how the deliberate introduction of sulfur into the atmosphere would mimic the cooling effect of volcanic ash.
Right. So when we say that we're concerned about chemtrails, pardon our language, maybe we shouldn't say chemtrails, but these guys are doing it. They've been studying it. This goes back years. And again, for those who wonder, well, if it was true, there'd certainly be a whistleblower come forward. Well, one has come forward. It's just that unfortunately, Kobe, how much time do we have? Probably not enough.
Not enough time.
No. So her name, she has two first names. Her name is Kristen Meghan, Meghan. Now, it's possible next week, maybe we'll get around to playing that, but not very likely. You can go to YouTube, put in Kristen Meghan, Meghan, followed by the word geoengineering or even chemtrails, and you'll see she's got a few talks that she gives. She's a former United States Air Force bioenvironmental engineer. I thought it would be easy to look her up once I got to the studio to look up a bio on her, and it's not easy to find online. So, but I do remember, going off memory, I remember that she described her job on base was she basically procured and tracked chemicals that they used on the base. She tracked them cradle to grave from the time they were to get them to the time they had to dispose of them. And she had to keep track exactly who would receive them, who would use them, where they would be stored, how they would be disposed of. And she was doing this to make sure everything was in line with OSHA and EPA regulations. And what she found was stunning, that there was sulfur, barium, and many others that would elements that they were getting in huge quantities, but nobody could account for where they were supposed to go. And she started asking questions like, what's this stuff for? Because it was her job to track it, and nobody would tell her what it was for. They finally told her that they could put her in an insane asylum for 5 months and take away her 5-year-old child. That was lawful under USAF regulations at the time. So they basically scared her, and other whistleblowers are apparently scared to come forward. Anyway, thank you for listening. This is Tom Coates. When I'm with Michelle Godin, we're Baldy and the Blonde. We are here every Wednesday at 4 on WGSO. You can listen to all of our old shows. Find links to them at baldyandtheblonde.com. On X, we are at Baldy Blonde. See you next week.